I'd planned this solo journey weeks in advance, just me, my backpack, and the promise of a quiet weekend in the mountains. The kind of trip that gave me the peace I needed, away from work, away from the noise of everyday life. The weather forecast had predicted clear skies, so I didn't bother packing extra rain gear. I was optimistic, ready for the solitude of nature. I arrived at the trailhead around mid morning, the sun already climbing high, scattering light across the dense woods. The parking lot was mostly empty, only one other car, a dusty old SUV, was parked near the entrance. It seemed like the perfect time to start my hike. Quiet, untouched. I slung my pack over my shoulder, double checked my water, and made sure I had everything I needed: snacks, a first aid kit, a flashlight, and my phone, although I wasn't expecting to need it. The trail ahead of me was wide and welcoming, flanked by tall pines on either side, their branches heavy with needles. The earth smelled fresh, like wet moss, and the distant chirp of birds was the only sound that filled the air. I loved that. As I walked, I focused on the rhythm of my boots crunching over the dirt path, the light breeze on my skin, the sense of being far removed from the world. Time seemed to slow out here. The trail wasn't overly difficult, a moderate incline with some rocky patches, but nothing that would require more than basic effort. I passed the first mile marker and kept going, my mind wandering as I hiked. The further I went, the more isolated it felt. The trail seemed to grow quieter, the trees taller and more densely packed. Occasionally, I'd look up and spot a flash of movement in the branches, a bird, perhaps, or a squirrel, but otherwise, everything was still. There was something peaceful about it, but also something unnerving. The silence in nature can be comforting, but it can also make you aware of the smallest sound, amplifying every step you take, every shift in the leaves. I had planned on reaching the summit by afternoon, but I wasn't in a hurry. It wasn't about the destination for me, it was about the journey. After another hour or so, I reached a fork in the trail. The signs were clear enough, one leading toward a steep, rocky incline that went straight up the mountain, the other winding toward a lower pass that curved around the side. I debated for a moment, but the higher path called to me. I liked the challenge of the climb. The rocks were loose in some places, making it more difficult than I anticipated. I took my time, using my hands to steady myself against the uneven surface. The higher I climbed, the more the forest began to thin out and the view grew broader. I could see the valley below, the winding river, the small patchwork of farms in the distance. For a moment, I stood there, just breathing in the view, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. But then, a strange feeling came over me. It wasn't fear, exactly, just a sense of being watched. I couldn't shake it. I glanced around, but there was nothing. No sign of movement, no sound that shouldn't be there. It was just the woods, the wind rustling the trees. Still, the feeling lingered. I shrugged it off, figuring it was just my mind playing tricks. I pressed on. As I neared the summit, the path narrowed and the rocks grew more jagged. The air felt thinner up here, colder, despite the sun. The wind was picking up, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. It wasn't unusual for the weather to shift quickly in the mountains, especially this high up. Still, Something about the change in temperature unsettled me. It felt wrong. I reached the top shortly after, wind whipped and out of breath. I stood there for a while, taking in the view. The valley below seemed like a different world, entirely quieter, smaller. The sun had started to dip a little lower in the sky, casting everything in a golden glow. But as beautiful as it was, I couldn't shake that creeping feeling from earlier. That sensation of being